Welcome to The Next Tier, a leadership podcast about the people decisions that shape organizations and the moments that define careers. We're bringing you candid conversations with executives, founders, and industry leaders about how they build teams, navigate complexity, and make high-stakes hiring and leadership decisions. Let's talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Next Tier, a brand new podcast where we sit down with executives, founders, and industry leaders to explore the career-defining moments and people decisions that are shaping organizations and the very future of work. We're throwing leadership theory out of the window. This is about real decisions, real stories, and what it takes to move a team, a company, or a career to the next tier. With that said, we're so excited if you're tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us for our inaugural episode and the next tier. Without further ado, I'm excited to announce our host, Betsy Robinson.
Thank you, Rob. And I'm so excited to welcome our first guest to the podcast. We are recording and launching this during Women's History Month, and as a women-owned company and someone who currently serves as the board president of Women in Technology, I could not think of a better first-time guest than my friend Jen Baker. Jen is a longtime leader in the technology community. She's a board member at Women in Technology, and she's currently the Chief Information Officer at Arvest Bank. And over the course of her career, Jen's built a reputation for bridging business and technology in a way that drives real growth, real transformation, and real results. She's got her Bachelor of Science in Technology Management from KSU, go Owls, and holds an AI strategy from Cornell University. Under Jen's strategic leadership, several top 50 banks have experienced comprehensive transformations, and most notably a $3 billion net new increase in revenue through streamlined operations and enhanced digital product offerings. Her work has been recognized with honors, including being named one of the top 3 women of impact in AI and tech by Rotary International, DEI Tech Leader of the Year by Technology Association of Georgia, and a CIO Orbie of the CIO of the Year finalist for the Orbie Awards in Georgia. But what I appreciate most isn't about Jen's background. It's how intentional she is about leadership and supporting women in technology, and really women at all ages and all paths in their career. Jen and I have known each other for WIT and the broader tech community for many, many years. I'm excited to call her a friend as well as a colleague. And I'm excited to have this conversation. It's not a formal interview. This is going to be honest dialogue about leadership, about growth, and about what it takes to move to the next tier. So with that, Jen, thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Congratulations on your podcast. This is exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Anything you want to add and introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh my gosh, no. Those introductions are always so embarrassing. I think to myself that puts an age on how long I've been doing this. So no, we're just going to let you put the exclamation point on it. We're just going to keep moving.
All right. I like that.
Betsy, as you were reading that, I'm like, that's all?
Yeah. I started when I was 5 and I'm now 10. Let's move on, Rob.
Exactly. And before I jump into the first question, I do want to also recognize my wonderful co-host, our COO here at Tier 4 Group, Robert Bouchard. So excited. Rob and I will be doing a lot of these podcasts together. Some we will be doing solo, and we'll each co-host. We'll have some fun guests throughout the year. We're going to be launching this once a month in 2026, possibly moving a little more often in 2027. But with that, thank you, Rob, for joining us.
Thank you.
Conversation today.
Thanks, Jen.
All right, Jen, you ready? You in the hot seat?
Let's do it. I do feel a little warm in here, so let's do it.
It is with all the lights. It is. All right. So, Jen, we've known each other through WIT and the tech community for years, but for our listeners who are meeting you for the first time, what should they know about Jen Baker beyond the titles that I listed earlier?
My gosh, I would say probably that I am just a relentless pursuer of whatever the next thing is. If it's knowledge, if it's supporting my team, if it's a new technology, it's just sort of a relentless passion that I just lean into on a regular basis. I will not know all the answers, but I can assure you I will figure it out, and I'll surround myself with people that are better educated and more knowledgeable and more able to sort of educate me. I think what's probably interesting is while I pursue from a relentless perspective, kind of, ongoing knowledge, I am a huge introvert. And every time I say that, someone rolls their eyes and someone kind of goes, no way. But I think what's interesting about that is it's good for people to recognize you don't have to be the extrovert to be the emerging leader in an organization and in something that you're pursuing. And I think oftentimes you think the loudest person in the room or the smartest person in a room on a certain topic, that's who gets promoted. And I would say just blow that up. That is not accurate at all. So this combination of a relentless pursuer makes me super diligent in the data and the preparation. And then it helps me offset being an introvert, being put in settings like this. So I come with my notes. I come over prepared because I'm really intentional about not wanting to show up and leave something on the table or leave an impact that I could have made just because I didn't put the extra thought and effort and energy into it.
I love that. And you know what's funny? The more and more, I would say women more so than men that I meet in leadership positions and get to know them more in a one-on-one or small group setting, that I'm finding more and more CIOs, COOs, C-level women in the boardroom are introverts. They truly are. That's not their nature to be extroverts, yet they're leading these massive organizations and massive transformations. Really
I would
insightful.
say, I think that tells me that you're a really good listener, though. And I think that probably leans itself into your leadership style as someone who's more of a listen first. I think that allows you to take all of the evidence and make decisions probably much faster than somebody like me who wants to talk my way through those things.
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about the correlation, but honestly, just in just the competitive nature that I have, I grew up in sports and did it throughout my entire life. But I had one of my first mentors that I'm really grateful for said, you can be an introvert, but you're trying to progress in your career to an extrovert. So what you do now matters, how you network, how you get educated, how you lean in on stretch assignments, and how you raise your hand in these settings really, really matters. And now is kind of when you build the foundation. But he said years ago, he said, you can be an introvert, but you're going to be paid to be an extrovert, which means people have to be bought into you and want to follow you. And when you think about it that way, you can start to be a little bigger and a little better than your tendency as an introvert to go, I need to show up differently. I need my words to mean something different. I need my presence and my demeanor to be something different because you just never know who's looking.
Mic drop.
Mm-hmm.
Mic drop.
Powerful.
Powerful. Let's talk about your journey.
Okay.
So you've bridged technology and business throughout your career. Did you always see yourself as a technologist when you started your career, or a business builder who happens to use technology?
Oh my gosh, it was never about technology. I just always kind of go back to that relentless pursuit. I was just trying to figure out how to fix what was broken. Was it a process? Was it a tool? Was it something? Years ago in my career, long before we had the term business process automation and long before we had AI, ML, I just was trying to fix what didn't work for my team. And so absolutely never intended to be a CTO at one point in my career, never intended to be a CIO. I just was solving the business problem and figuring out what does that mean and how do I get educated on it so that I make an informed decision. But gosh, technology was just always throughout my career, just what would allow me to fix it, what would allow me to enable something to be more effective or more efficient. But no, I wasn't trying to be a technologist. I didn't have a traditional engineering or a traditional development background. So in my head, those are the people that you put in CTO roles, and those are the people that become your CIOs, is this traditional grounded technology skill set. And so no, it was never on my radar at all to even think about being a technology executive.
Well, you're a great one. So I'm glad that it did. But it's funny you mentioned that, because I do think that that's the traditional path a lot of people think about to move into those CTO, CIO roles, are people that come from the technology backgrounds. And that is absolutely rapidly changing and evolving. And then we're also seeing your CIOs move into your business roles, your CEO seats, your COO seats. So what's different about leading technology today versus even 5 or 6 years ago?
Oh my gosh, I have the phrase that someone shared with me, so I can't even take credit for it. But they were brilliant. And it was this idea of from the engine room to the boardroom. And so 5 years ago was the mechanics. It was the how do you build something? How do you evolve something? How do you rip and replace a platform? How do you re-engineer something that maybe works or doesn't work in your organization? Now it's around how do you build a team and a strategy that can continue to address a large number of emerging skills and a large number of emerging technologies that are now sort of making their way into any industry. Just choose one: healthcare, banking, just insert blank. But I think Now it has to be even more focused on how do you tell the story? How do you build a narrative around progress? And how do you not treat it one project at a time, which is that kind of engineering or engine room mindset to say, one thing and then you build on it, and then one thing and then you build on it. Well, you're not in a world anymore that lets you have that sequential luxury. So now your narrative has to be very fluid and very high volume, high value, simplified complexity, and you've got a really robust roadmap that you got to get after with a real sense of purpose and urgency in order to remain competitive, regardless of what your industry is.
I think that's a wonderful point. And how have you balanced those periods of either talent shortages or balancing speed versus governance risk or cyber risk versus business risk? So how do you do that in a world that's moving so fast and where change is constant? How do you balance that?
I would love to tell you that there's a great answer and that I do a great job of balancing. This is one of those questions that's just, it's a balance between an art and a science. There will be things that make their way to my desk that's very clear, very linear. You've got 3 options. Here's your cost impacts associated with it. Here's the residual cyber risk associated with it. Let's make the most informed decision on the information that we have. A little more kind of maybe black and white, a little more structured, a little more kind of towards the engine room decisions. You've got other things that make their way to me, which is just simply, I don't even know what our perspective needs to be on something. And so you can't use that same rigid thought process of what are my options, what are my costs, what are the risks, and then boom, make a decision. There's a lot more influence that I think is now becoming, it used to be called a soft skill, but influence is now becoming the most mission critical skill for any leader, because you're not going to always be the smartest or the loudest or the most influential or the most impactful in the room, but yet you're still accountable to make a decision. So who you surround yourself with and the criteria that you use in those settings where it's a little more of operating in the gray really has to be a well thought out, really probably I would say courageous view, recognizing that you're going to have to be super vulnerable. You will get some stuff right. You will get some stuff wrong, and both are going to have to absolutely be okay, because it's leaning in towards progress versus waiting on some magical solution or option or, operating model to sort of answer every one of your questions.
I love that. And at some point, we're going to have to say the words AI during this conversation.
I would like the record to show it was not me.
It was
that
me.
Brought it up.
It was me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor. But no, seriously, AI is going to have to play a part in that getting things right, getting things wrong, because there's going to be a whole lot more getting things wrong and having to pivot much quicker than staying the course and getting things right. You're going to pilot things up. You're going to try something. You're going to release something. And it may have been the right thing to do, or the technology is going to change so fast that you're going to have to realize, okay, that's not the direction we want to go, or this is wrong, and quickly pivot. And I don't think we had that luxury maybe many years ago. I could be wrong.
No, I think that's right. I also think AI is a little bit, I maybe view it a little bit differently than probably what a traditional kind of engineering or development CIO would look at. I view AI as one of those very interesting human behavior adjustment science projects. And here's what I mean by that. If you're going after, here's the tool and here's the the cost, and here's all of the risk associated with it, and kind of going back to that engine room kind of style of decisioning. If that's the approach you're going to take with AI, you're going to naturally get some value out of it, but it's going to be heavy in things like workplace productivity, because you're going to be locked into that mindset that says it has to be a 1-for-1. If I invest $1 here, I have to achieve $1 here. Where I think you think about the human centered, and I don't want to call it human in the loop because that's sort of a technology term around the AI piece, but that human centric view is you've got to have a different level of professional maturity to go, I'm okay automating something that sits in my world. I am okay with maybe trying something and it being absolutely throwaway from a manageable cost and risk perspective, solely for the purpose of educating my organization and myself and my team. When you're in a world and executives have to choose where they have discretionary funding and where they need this rock solid engineer room type activity, AI forces you to take all of that and throw it out the window and go, now what? And so if you're so focused on a 1-for-1, you're never going to be able to really evolve and mature at the organizational level to see the full impacts that it has, what we know today, right? And that doesn't even make the assumption of it continuing to evolve. I think if you can figure out some way to get really comfortable, maybe you call it vulnerability, maybe you call it just R&D, maybe you call it proof of concepts, whatever it is for your organization, you have to lean in to do more of those and more quickly or at a higher pace for those so that you can get the learning and then decide if it's valuable for you and then move on. I think right now it's just sort of perceived as like the next technology platform. And I think it really does every organization that has an executive kind of thinking about it that way. Like, let me see your AI landscape and your roadmap. Well, that's great. It's probably going to look and feel differently in a week from now and 6 months from now. But if you need it for a 5-year landscape, I can find some noodles from off the wall and put them on there because that's about the extent of knowledge we may have over the course of like a 5-year item. So, I say the human-centered thing is kind of interesting because it requires leaders to lead differently. You're not going to have every answer and you still got to lean in.
Right.
It's going to require organizations to think differently, to go, I want some value out of it, but it's not going to be one for one. And that might be really tough in some organizations, particularly like banking, like healthcare that are highly regulated. You need to have a great story. You need to have a great, quote, roadmap. Maybe it's not 5 years long, but you got to be able to say you're being a good, corporate steward of the funds, but you really have got to give yourself a little grace around what are the benefits and what are the actual outcomes that I can commit to as an executive to say, we will do X. And that's not as sexy when you say, we will get better educated. Great. What are you spending for that, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity from an industry standpoint to think through executives that are responsible for AI. How do you position the narrative? And what's your threshold of learning and your threshold of cost that says this may be absolute throwaway, but it's not throwaway in our learning and in our better positioning for the next item that we want to review. It may be throwaway for this particular piece. I think that's a different mindset altogether, I think.
I would agree with you. And what we've seen, and I'm sure you have comments on this, is you could iterate on that and find the greatest thing that works, that is going to give so much more power into the human's hands to be more efficient with the 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day that they're working. But you have so many people averse to change and who just want to keep operating in the same method in which they were successful for the past 10, 20 years.
But there's also a customer impact of that, right? So let's take healthcare and banking, just because obviously that's kind of where my history has been. Your customers are looking at 60 Minutes. They're looking at, online and see all of these security or data breaches or whatever it is, right? So then if you're going to be not even a fast follower, but if you're going to be a real trailblazer and you're going to say, I'm going out of the gate and we're going to use AI for anything and everything pertaining to, let's say, our digital customer profiles or our experiences, your customers are on that journey with you. And they are being influenced by things that are not within your experience and control. They're being influenced by wherever they do their business. If they've received one of those letters that says, hey, you've had a breach of this and this and this information, and hey, you need to contact your credit bureaus because you may have been negatively impacted. Your customers in a lot of different industries, banking and healthcare, the way we're kind of chatting about today, they may not want you to be the trailblazer. So how do you strike this balance of organizationally, I know there's value and I know we need to be pursuing it or we're going to be left behind, which includes an impact to our customers. But you've also got a different dynamic of what is your customer base really okay with you dabbling with, right? They don't know I'm doing AI from a code assist standpoint behind the four walls of the technology team,
and they don't
right?
care.
No.
They don't care. But when you start to put it in consumer and into commercial segments where it's their products and their services and they're on digital platforms, their tolerance or their understanding that's influenced by things outside of you really comes into play. So what's your narrative? How do you bring them along to say, here's what we're going to use it for, but here's what we're not going to use it for, and here's why, so that when they are looking at the really impressive AI dogs that are featured on 60 Minutes, they don't correlate and panic about, oh my gosh, what does that look like and feel like for me when they see an article or they see a podcast from their CIO at their local bank talking about AI, right? So I think it's this really great thing for us to lean into, and the opportunities are just, I think, endless. How you manage it and how you sequence the narrative and start to educate your team and your organization around who we are and how it's a component of our strategy, not the only thing that's part of our strategy. It's an art.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, Betsy, you're hitting on it. We say this all the time, Jen, repeat what works and iterate what doesn't. I think that goes hand in hand. And when we look at our journey and what we've been on here, we use AI for decision support, not decision authority. And I think that's a very fine line to balance. And then I think you're also talking about the journey of your customer. And we think about the journey of our customers. And Betsy's heard me talk about this a lot, but as a society, we're going through this consumption fatigue right now because, to your point, we're being hyper-marketed all day, every day, all the time. And how we filter that out, there's so much noise. And I think the race that's on is organizations that are trying to find that balance, to your point, between leveraging that technology and then people are the ones that ultimately, as we think about mainframe to on-prem to in cloud to now the AI era of technology, are going to come out on the other side ahead. They just are. I really believe it.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had a demo yesterday with my team that they're looking at. It's not disclosing anything potentially, but we're looking at how could you leverage AI in the vulnerabilities management space. So you guys know from a tech staffing standpoint, it's part of business as usual, unfortunately, for any organization. It's just how do you remain current on what you have in your technology stack. But we're looking at a way to do predictive analytics based on all of the information that it's pulling. And so how can that help you not just alleviate from an automated standpoint what you have as maybe open vulnerabilities potentially, but it starts to give you some predictive analytics to say, okay, come, Microsoft Tuesday when the next batch drops, right? What of those did I potentially already be able to see from a technical depth perspective that I could get ahead of? So it's just this idea, but that takes time to introduce. It takes time to get everybody comfortable with that. How do we have our version of human in the loop for that example? And then you need some time from a duration standpoint to be able to put it in, run it in a parallel path, and validate from an organizational standpoint that what we would have done manually to do this versus what we will do via an AI solution is comparable. And so it's that kind of stuff that I'm like, we're not behind on anything. We're just figuring out exactly where our value is going to be and where it's a differentiator versus just, it's on our roadmap for 5 years, but it's a wish list item.
Yeah. And I think you were talking about return, like a dollar for dollar based on investment. And that's something where I think we've struggled to measure. That return a lot of times is capacity and not necessarily a monetary example. Rhetorically speaking, Betsy and I talked about this a lot. It's like, okay, if we do create more capacity for the team, what does that mean? What are they doing with that additional time? Is it actually creating production? If you look at a lot of the Gartner studies out there that show that even with all of these advancements in technology, our jobs really haven't gotten easier.
They're just different.
And that hurts really bad.
But it also, just that example, it matters on what your maturity level is around resource planning and capacity within your respective organization. So you're saying, okay, great. So you create capacity. I can quantify it in the number of times I touch this item and the number of average, time that it takes me to do that. So I can get a soft number around value, right? But if you don't have a really mature capacity in planning, either tool, system, process, whatever you want to say within your organization, you're going to struggle to go, Rob created 32% capacity, so I can now move him to something else that's higher value. But Jen was only 6% because she's spending her time on podcasts with cool people. Yeah. So there's to some extent, like we're talking about the meaningful piece of it, but there's some preliminary work at the organizational level that if that doesn't exist for you, you're pursuing an AI solution and you don't have the underpinning that's going to allow you to report on it differently, to then influence long-term decisions differently. And so you got to run in parallel paths of cleaning up maybe something or building something that's not super flashy, but necessary to be able to tell the narrative and to tell the reporting in a much more mature way that allows you to continue to evolve at the same rate that the technology is.
Yeah, and I think kind of last point on this, hearing you say that, I just go document, 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 document. Like we can't over
Use AI to do your standard operating procedures.
Correct. Yeah. And have those clearly buttoned out so that, there is a tribal knowledge or a reference, no matter how mature your environment is. It's the importance of that cannot be understated.
Yeah. And it's also so interesting, like, we talk about, and each of you are involved heavily from a staffing standpoint around as you have roles that elect to retire or they elect to move on to a different organization, right? That's when you say, oh my gosh, we're going to have a knowledge gap. Well, what prevented you from leveraging AI in a workplace productivity capacity, all kidding aside, to say, get your standard operating procedures built out, get your reporting and metrics built out so that you can build a comprehensive tech team that isn't defined by a handful of 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever the number is that can cripple you because we just didn't spend the time to get really crisp on what they have, what their institutional knowledge is, and to your point, document as much as possible. What a great AI use case around workplace productivity, but it ends up being on my desk as here's how we've gotten ahead of potential attrition. Here's what it looks like. Here's how we're weaving it into succession planning. So now you're building depth as a result of having, a lot of the administration taken off of you. Like those are the things that I get super stoked about.
Yeah. Prompt remove any unnecessary end dashes, right? I mean, I don't need my hyphens in my documentations. Remove those.
I'm the daughter of an English teacher and retired school principal, and I was a magazine editor all of my 20s. I used an M-dash before ChatGPT, and I'm really, really angry that I can't use it anymore because people think I wrote with AI.
Listen, I'm a firm fan. I always loved English and grammar growing up. I love a semicolon. I don't even know why, but I will find a reason in every email to use a semicolon. And my team, when they hear this, are going to laugh because now they're going to find themselves spotting it. I'm just sort of having the courageous candor to say it's there and I love it.
I kid you not, on a call a few hours ago, we were going through a document that we were going to be sending over to a customer. And I said, AI writes with 1 period or 1 space after the period. It's 2. And there was a whole argument about whether it was 1 or 2. And I was like, I don't care if officially 1 is okay now. It's 2. And the Oxford comma will be here forever. So that's our grammar lesson.
Gosh, the Oxford comma.
Don't take my comma away.
Do we highlight that in yellow? The Oxford comma? Is it highlighted in yellow?
No.
No. Okay.
All right. I have one more question around leadership and technology. Then I want to move on to talking about women in technology, given we are here with a Women's History Month spotlight. But what's one part of your job as a CIO or just executive of a bank in general that would really surprise people the most?
Oh my gosh, I am a chief translator, period. Translate a problem, translate a defect, translate a vendor pushback, translate an impact that happened as a result of something we did via a change, translate a new strategy since it's a new, I'm a new leader in this particular organization. I think, it kind of goes back to what we started at the beginning around influence. I was always a big believer in it, but I think the further I got in my career, the more I recognized it could be a deal breaker or it could be a design builder. And so that is literally the guidance that I give to everybody that I am advocating for and coaching is figure out how to build your skill around influence, because that will be your differentiator as you continue to grow, regardless of the organization, regardless of the title, regardless of what your functional role and responsibilities are. Get really crisp with that. So I think that's probably one, is that you think in your mind it's just at this level you're making decisions. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we said earlier with the facts. Sometimes we said earlier without the facts, which is really alarming. So this idea of translating risk and translating impact and translating how it's going to land on somebody from a change management standpoint through the organization, taking into account how do you translate if you're in an organization or in a team with change fatigue? It's a thing. So you can have the best laid plans and you can have the best idea, but if where you are right now can't handle one more thing onto the mix of things, you got to figure out how to translate and influence in a different way than maybe what you would have a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is. I think the funny one that people would be surprised is I am a night owl. So I really have to use the schedule when to send the email, because I think you'd be shocked at 3 a.m. I couldn't shut my brain down. So I really needed to send you this email at 3:03 a.m. around this product or service or question that I had, or I read an article as I was going to bed and I just wanted to share and have you think about it so that we can talk about it in less than 5 hours when you get it at 8 a.m. and I'm in a meeting with you at 9:30, which is not reasonable. So I work very diligently on not overwhelming my team at 3 a.m. and not sending them so many things that it's not clear on what the priority is. And if I just send it because it's interesting, or if I send it because it needs attention. And so I'm a big proponent of putting in the subject line, action needed, information provided, a very big fan.
Rob's going to look at me and just stare me down.
Up the fifth on this one. Ben.
Oh,
Not
that leads me
perfect.
down different question.
I have not perfected the don't send it at 3 a.m. But I will say Copilot helps with that. It'll
does.
just say schedule it, and it is it's a lot better that way. So I feel that in my soul.
We're
Feel that in
talking
my
about women in technology and Women's History Month. I'll give you a really interesting example. I read an article recently that said you're never going to be recognized. Maybe never is a little too harsh, but you're likely not to be recognized for the work that you put in. Early on, I had a manager who was she was female. She was very adamant that it was her responsibility, like her due diligence. Like she would not go to bed at night if she did not feel like she took one of these two paths. And the first path was being an obstacle for those women coming up through their career, similar to kind of replicate what she had gone through, because she wanted to prepare them. That was using air quotes, prepare them for what the next step would look like. And so she really took a sense of pride in being very problematic and argumentative and territorial and condescending, thinking that you were going to earn your badge. If she would put her name on you, it's because you were thick-skinned and you could handle all of this criticism. The flip side of that, if you didn't choose that or choose that path, the flip side of that was you just would be supportive and be an advocate and just say, hey, listen, we're going to all get there. I don't know what the timing is, but I don't have to dim your light in order to make mine brighter. So let's just sort of tag team and figure out how do we both grow in our careers, and may the best person win. And that was going to be okay. I'm grateful in hindsight that I had her early on in my career, because it provoked, I was closer to my high school and my college athletics. It provoked a different level of competition to go, okay, that's how we're going to do this. I got you. Watch this.
Watch me.
Watch this. So for whatever reason, I know, a lot of why we're getting together today is just to kind of think through how do we help from a Women's History Month? How do we help from a women in technology standpoint? I think it's important that you remember those moments, whether it was a mentor, whether it was a coach at some point, whether it was a peer that you've had. Make sure that it still fuels you and that you are grounded to why you are the way you are as a leader, and make sure that as you continue to grow and evolve, that you don't need to revisit it. And so early on in my career, I was like, I will never take that approach. I will never be an intentional leader that puts an obstacle in your way simply to see how you react to it. And so I think it's even more interesting now when I share that story to say it's why I kind of went to the 180 on the other side. I chose a different path. I chose to say, may the best person win. And I'm going to be right there with you in the weeds. And we're going to grow together and we're going to learn together. But I'm not going to be the reason you don't get it. And I think it's interesting because, you graciously shared in your overview around kind of me being an advocate. I think that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my career is I didn't deviate from that. And I have no intentions of doing so. My title can change. The expectations can change. My age can change. Anything can change. But it's a relentless, I go back to that. It's a relentless pursuit to I will be a better leader and a better advocate for anybody coming behind me, male or female, because I hated how I felt with that particular leadership style. And I thought, I don't want to be part of the problem. I will be, and I choose to be every day to be part of the solution from an advocacy standpoint.
I love that. And it's one of the things I've got to witness the most from you, just being around you and hearing you speak. And I'll jump on that as well. I've worked for some pretty terrible bosses earlier on in my career, all men, actually, no women. I never worked for a woman ever in my career. But I think what shapes me about my leadership style is exactly that. I don't necessarily sometimes know exactly what I want to be, but I sure as hell know what I don't want to be.
Absolutely.
And I think that, to your point, is a great place to start, is thinking about those leaders early on, especially the ones that might have been shaping our career, and knowing the difference between what good, great, terrible looked like, and being very intentional as you grow to make sure you're not making those same mistakes for the people around you and the people on your teams. And that brings me to a fun story of how I first knew who Jen Baker was. Obviously, being a volunteer board member, et cetera, with Women in Technology for a very long time, before Jen was on our board, she came and spoke on a panel. I don't remember what the panel was about. I honestly don't even remember who else was on the stage with you, but I was sitting at the front table and remember thinking, okay, she's not, you hadn't spoken a lot. You were the CTO at Synovus at the time. I think I probably thought you lived in Columbus, but anyway, was so like, I left that forum. I think I even sent you like a LinkedIn. You didn't accept it right away, and I got my feelings hurt. But I was like,
we are really airing some we're airing laundry here, Rob. I'm glad you're here
She's
as a
made
witness.
up for it. But I was like, I have to like be friends with her, know her, like just, just like fangirl, right? Of like things you said on the stage. But one of them is tied into that leadership. You were like, once you get to the top, you use an elevator reference. You said you have to keep sending it back down over and over and over and over again to make sure that more women are intentionally being brought up to that floor. And that was that was my very first impression of you then. And then, like I said, years later, having gotten to know you, gotten to support you from a recruiting standpoint and friend and all the other things, like you absolutely lived that. And that's one of the things I admire the most about you. So going into talk about women in technology and all the work that we do and have done for the past few years, we've spent a lot of years in this space. So what progress have you seen around women in technology? And then where do you still think we have work to do?
Gosh, I'm so torn about this one. I think it's interesting I appreciate you saying that about the elevator. I cannot take credit for that. That is absolutely my big sister, Tamara. She will literally probably comment on LinkedIn if I don't give her credit. So let's just throw it out.
Shout out Tamara.
Shout out Tamara. There you go. I think along those same lines, I think we do a better job of throwing ourselves out there, even when we don't meet 100% of the criteria, to at least get our name on the roster, work for the interview, whether we get the role or not. I think we do a much better job of recognizing that, instinctively, most of the time we won't apply. Statistics show us we don't apply for roles unless, I think, Betsy, keep me straight, I think it's 80% or higher of the criteria in the job description that we will meet. I think we're doing a better job of educating and throwing it out there to say, just put your name in the hat. It's great experience for the discussion. It's great experience to figure out the questions. It's just good sort of overall professional development. So get out of your own way, even if you're an introvert, and sort of throw your name in the hat. Where I think we're struggling, and I think the McKinsey Women in the Workplace survey that they released in 24, they do it every couple of years, so I'm kind of anxious to see it in 26. But what it highlighted for us is that we're losing so many in the middle tier of leaders. So maybe that's your managers, senior managers, directors, senior directors, before they really get to the C-suite level. We're losing so many in that space before the age of 35. So then I think through, remember, I'm a relentless pursuer, right, towards progress. So for me, I start to get real compartmentalized and go, okay, where is the gap? Is it on the early education pieces? And do we have enough momentum and enough people and enough sets of hands being really intentional about that to say, we got to start educating, our young women much earlier in the process so that they know this is an option, right? So I think we're doing a pretty good job on early education. When you start to move it into more advanced education, we start to lose a little momentum. We've still got some activity. We've got some really great organizations, but we're also losing some, like a Women Who Code, that had a real big focus towards kind of advanced education.
They're back, though.
I had not seen that.
They're back.
That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I went to their conference last fall just when they relaunched. It'll be back in October.
Love it. That's amazing. So I think when you go from advanced education now into early career, go back to the examples we've talked about from a mentorship standpoint. Are we doing what we need to do as a women in the community and in all of our different industries to be actively trying to be out and accessible and approachable from a mentorship perspective, even if it's just on one skill? Oftentimes you get asked about mentorship around, can you be everything to everybody? That's a tough sell for me. I think you choose different mentors on a specific skill that you're trying to close. So I think in that early career, we got to get really crisp and we got to roll our sleeves up and we've got to be sort of reaching across all of the different areas that we have access and influence in to say, let me help. I saw you here. I'd love to help you. Let's work together. Let's figure out what introductions do you need? What skills do you want to work on? Because I think that early career is where we're losing as they go into middle career and they're out by the age of 35. Think about that. So we don't have enough volume in the early education, the advanced education, and the early career to offset the percentage of what we're losing in middle. And oh, by the way, that middle tier that we're losing is your next C-suite. They are your next set of examples and of advocates that can influence industries and organizations. So I would say, yes, we're doing great in pockets depending on where we lean in. I think where we've got huge opportunity is we still need to rally. We need to rally with allies. We need to rally amongst ourselves. We need to rally in our organizations. We are losing so many talented women at that middle tier for no reason other than they don't feel supported. It's not lack of skill. It's not lack of knowledge. It's not lack of education. It's lack of support. 100%. So if you're seeing somebody beside you, roll your sleeves up and help. Because in the end, it all benefits and we start to influence much more volume going through each stage of that sort of life cycle. I'll just kind of put maybe an exclamation point on it to use the Taylor Swift comment. When I was a CTO, I was one of 11% across the top 1,000 organizations. Think about that in 2023 when it happened, 2024, I forget the year when I became the CTO. Think about that, 11%.
It's horrible.
So all of these activities that we've got going on early on to infuse more volume into the pipeline, fantastic. But then what are we doing when they get there? And how do you support in a different capacity, which is honestly why I started to get involved in women in technology from a board perspective and getting involved in a just, member and going to the events and starting to sort of network and starting to figure out, okay, is there something I can do that can help? Is there somebody else that potentially can help me? Like it was very dual focused initially to go, I don't know what to do, where to go and how to get help, but I know I need help. Mm-hmm. So I just think of, I haven't looked at the statistic on female CIOs, but I suspect it's not probably much better than female CTOs. And so it's not working. And so, we joke about it with our teams. If something's not working, what do you do as a leader? All right, let's go back to the drawing. Where are we losing this, right? If you're a digital engineer, you're looking at where you're losing people in the activity and progressing in a digital, workflow. Why are we not looking at it from that same lens to say, we're not getting the volume. We're losing a lot of really talented people. And so it means just organizationally, regardless of the industry, we're losing a lot of talent that could be influencing and moving us in a direction. So, exclamation point.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Next Tier. Join us for part 2 as we continue the conversation with Jen to discuss women in tech embracing the uncommon and evolving hiring strategies. Be sure to subscribe to The Next Tier on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.